Marrying a seaman. How embarrassing. My parents sneered. My brother laughed. Who'd even show up to that wedding? They turned their backs. I walked the aisle. Alone. Until our wedding aired on national TV. Their phones blew up. The garden was quiet, save for the soft rustle of the wind through the trees, and the faint sound of a violin playing somewhere in the distance. The setting sun bathed the coastal landscape in a warm orange glow, casting long shadows over the empty chairs lined up in neat rows. 3 chairs sat at the front, each with a card attached, reading, "Mother of the bride," "Father of the bride," and "Brother," but they were empty. Cold. Unattended. My family had made it clear they would not be there. I stood at the entrance of the garden, dressed in an ivory gown, my fingers nervously adjusting the hem as I looked out over the space. This was supposed to be the moment I'd walk toward the future, hand in hand with my family by my side. But instead, it was just me standing alone. The sounds of the violin filled the silence, but it couldn't drown out the echo of their voices in my head. Marrying a seaman, my mother had said, her voice dripping with disdain. How embarrassing. My brother had laughed when I told him, a mocking laugh that still rang in my ears. Who'd even show up to that wedding? He'd sneered, as though the mere thought of me marrying someone from a lower rank was the ultimate joke. My father, too, had refused to take part in the day I thought would bring us closer. He had ignored my call that morning, letting the phone ring unanswered until it went to voicemail. I tried to call them one last time. In the bridal cottage, just hours before the ceremony. I was desperate, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd change their minds. But as expected, my mother answered with that sharp tone she always used when she was too disgusted to even speak plainly. Well, she had said, as if answering the phone was a chore, "We're not coming." That was it. No apologies. No explanation. Just a cold dismissal, like I wasn't even worth a full sentence. They hadn't just rejected my wedding. They rejected me. And, in the process, they rejected Ethan, but I walked anyway, alone. The path to the altar seemed longer than I remembered, the air heavier, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Behind me, there was silence. No footsteps, no one to link arms with me. Just the weight of my family's absence pressing down on my shoulders. I walked because I had to. Because I chose to. The last orange streaks of sunlight faded as I took my first step down the aisle. But there was no warmth from them. It was only the quiet strength of the people who were there. The friends who showed up. The few soldiers from Ethan's ship. And his family. Who loved me for who I was, not for what I could offer them. Then I heard the voice. "If the bride will allow it," a deep voice called out. I turned, surprised to see Master Chief Wilcox, standing at the end of the aisle in his full dress uniform, looking both proud and awkward at the same time. "If the bride will allow it," he repeated. "I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle." I blinked, my throat tightening. I hadn't expected this. "Yes," I whispered, nodding, unable to find the words. He was a man who had never been afraid to speak his mind. But in that moment, he saw me not as a naval officer, but as a woman who had been let down by the people who should have loved her the most. Together, we stepped forward, the music swelling around us. And in that moment, despite the absence of my family, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Strength. Not the strength that came from titles or rank, but the quiet strength of knowing that I had chosen this life, and no one else could take that from me. As we walked, I couldn't help but think. This was only the beginning. What none of them knew, not my parents, not my brother, not anyone who had turned their back on me, was that in just a few weeks, our wedding would air on national television. And their phones would blow up. They would be the ones waiting for a chance to apologize, hoping they could erase their words. But for now, it was just me, Ethan, and the quiet strength of knowing we had done the right thing. I stood there, feeling the weight of the silence wrap around me. The ceremony had just begun, but my mind kept circling back to the phone call I had made just hours earlier. The one that confirmed what I already knew. My mother's words still echoed in my head. "We're not coming." I didn't want to admit it, but I had hoped. Hoped that maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise me, show up, and pretend none of it mattered. But they didn't. And now, walking down the aisle alone, with no one to cheer me on, the truth settled in. This was the life I had chosen. And it was one I would live on my own terms. Master Chief Wilcox, his dress uniform sharp and his posture unwavering, was beside me. His presence was steadying, grounding me in a way no one else could. He had been through battles and wars, but right now, his focus was solely on me. "You're doing great, ma'am," he said in his low, gravelly voice. I nodded, offering a tight smile in return. "Thank you." I could hear the faint whispers of the guests behind us, the soft music of the violin still floating in the air. But my thoughts kept drifting back to the call. Earlier that day, I had hoped to hear something different when I dialed my mother's number. Maybe some sign of softness, of understanding. I had tried to reason with her, but it was like talking to a wall. She didn't care about me, not really. Not unless it was convenient for her. The phone had rung 3 times before she answered. "Yes," she said, her voice sharp, as if I were intruding on something important. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The ceremony starts at 5. I just wanted to give you one more chance to be there." I almost laughed at how pathetic that sounded. One more chance. As if they hadn't already made their decision. "No, thank you," she said, so coldly that it sent a shiver through me. "We already told you. We're not coming." I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. "Please, Mom, this is important to me. I just want you there." She sighed, almost as if she were inconvenienced by my request. "You're marrying a Seaman, Kaitlyn. Do you understand how embarrassing that is? It's not just about you, you know. It's about the family name. The way people will see us." Her words hit me like a slap. She didn't care about my happiness. She cared about how the world would see her. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. I couldn't let her see how much her rejection still hurt. And then, just like that, she hung up. I'd called my father next, but he didn't even answer. He had been so distant for so long, but today, his silence felt like a statement in itself. Like he had given up on me completely. When I finally received a text from my brother, it was everything I expected. "Don't expect us. Enjoy your little ship deck wedding." He added a laughing emoji at the end, as though it were all some kind of joke. The pain, the frustration, and the anger bubbled up inside me, But I swallowed it down. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. Ethan had been by my side through all of this, steady as always. When I told him about the call, he didn't try to sugarcoat it or offer empty reassurances. He just sat with me, his presence enough to calm the storm inside me. "Your family loves the idea of a daughter in the Navy," he said softly, his hand finding mine. "But they don't respect the Navy itself. Not when it's me in the uniform." His words stung, but they were true. My parents were more concerned with their social image than they were with my happiness. And that hurt more than anything. "Maybe someday," I whispered, but I didn't believe it. Not really. I had spent years trying to win their approval, bending over backward to meet their expectations. But now, it was clear to me, nothing I did would ever be enough for them. "Maybe," Ethan said, his voice gentle but firm. "But even if they never come around, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere." I leaned into him, the smell of his dress whites, mixing with the scent of the salt air, and the faintest hint of engine grease. It was a comforting scent. One that reminded me of the life we had built together, far away from the expectations of my family. "I just don't want to walk alone," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Before Ethan could respond, a voice interrupted us. "No Navy officer walks alone. Not on my watch." I turned, surprised to see Master Chief Wilcox standing there, looking a little uncomfortable but resolute. He cleared his throat, as if he'd just realized how sentimental he sounded. "If the bride will allow it," he said with a small, awkward smile, "I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle." My eyes welled up with tears as I looked at him. Ethan's hand rested on my back, the silent message clear. Family isn't always about blood. "Yes," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I'd be honored." And so, with Master Chief at my side, I began walking. A.M. The sound of my heels clicking against the pavement seemed louder than it should have been. But it wasn't the sound that mattered. It was the weight I no longer carried alone. My family had refused to show up, but here I was, walking toward my future, toward Ethan, and toward the life I had chosen for myself. The guests were all standing now, their faces blurred by the tears in my eyes, but I didn't care. I had my own support now. I had Ethan, and I had Master Chief. I had the strength to walk this path, no matter how lonely it seemed. The aisle stretched before me, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. The wedding ceremony passed in a blur, a whirlwind of faces, smiles, and laughter that felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else. Master Chief Wilcox had been a silent pillar of strength beside me as I walked down the aisle. Ethan had waited at the end, his smile lighting up the entire garden. But even with all the love surrounding me, I couldn't shake the absence of my family. The evening went on without a hitch. Ethan and I exchanged vows, our promises of forever ringing out with conviction, but inside, there was a quiet ache. My phone sat on the table, face down, its silence a reminder that my family still hadn't reached out, still hadn't cared enough to even send a message. After the ceremony, as we headed to the reception, Ethan could see the look on my face. "You okay?" he asked softly, his hand finding mine. I looked up at him, the man I had chosen, the man I loved. "I'm fine," I said, my voice cracking. "It's just, I thought they'd be here. I thought they'd care." Ethan didn't respond at first. He simply squeezed my hand, offering a quiet kind of support that I knew didn't need words. He understood. He'd always understood. "You've been there for me," I continued, my voice steadier now. "I guess I just wanted them to be there too." Ethan's eyes softened as he nodded. "Family doesn't always come through, Kaitlyn. But you've got me. And you've got people here who love you for who you are, not who they think you should be." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "I know," I whispered. "But I don't know if I'm ready to let go of them." We sat for a moment, the soft hum of music from the reception playing in the background, as I tried to gather my thoughts. The night had been beautiful, everything I had imagined for years, yet it felt incomplete. Ethan's mom had pulled me aside earlier, her smile warm and genuine as she wrapped me in a tight hug. "Welcome to the family," she had said, and I had almost cried in her arms. It wasn't what I expected, but in that moment, it felt like home. But then, just a few hours ago, I had stood there, in front of everyone, with an empty heart. The only people I wanted to share this moment with were the ones who had never shown up. The people who should have been there. They hadn't even called. I glanced at Ethan, my heart heavy with the realization that this wasn't just about my wedding day. This was about my whole life, the choices I had made, and the price I'd paid for them. "I'll never understand them," I said softly. "How they can just walk away like that, without even trying to understand what this means to me. To us." Ethan leaned in, his voice firm but comforting. "You can't control their actions, Kaitlyn. You can't force them to see you the way you want them to. But you can control how you live your life. And right now, you're living it. With me. And that's what matters." I nodded, but the ache in my chest didn't subside. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to feel whole in this new life, in this new reality, where my family didn't fit into the picture. But it was hard. I had spent so many years trying to fit into their world, trying to meet their expectations. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I hesitated. It could be a work call, something important. But I felt my heart race as I picked it up. "Hello," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, is this Lieutenant Commander Kaitlyn Turner?" a bright, practiced voice asked. "We're with a national television network, and we'd love to feature you and your husband in a segment about innovation in the Navy. We've heard about your husband's work with ship safety. It's remarkable. We'd love to do a story on it." I blinked, stunned. You want to feature us?" "Yes." The voice continued. "Would love to highlight how enlisted sailors, like your husband, are making a difference. And we heard your wedding was quite intimate. We'd love to include some wedding photos. We think it would make a beautiful human interest piece." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't think anyone would be interested in something like that. "Well, we do," the producer said. "We believe it would inspire people. Would you be open to discussing this further?" I could barely process what she was saying. A story about us. About Ethan and me. The thought felt surreal. But as I glanced over at Ethan, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of curiosity and excitement, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was the universe's way of showing me that I didn't need to prove anything to my family. "Yes," I finally said, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. Yes, we'd love to. The producer gave me details about the next steps, and I hung up the phone, still feeling a little dazed. Ethan smiled, a glint of amusement in his eyes. Guess we're about to be famous, he said, teasing. I smiled back, though it was a bittersweet smile. Fame, recognition. It all felt so strange, so distant from everything I had known. But there was a part of me that welcomed it. Not for the fame itself, but for the chance to prove that Ethan was more than just a Seaman. He was brilliant, hardworking, and deserving of respect. For the first time that day, a glimmer of pride warmed my chest. This was our story, our life. And I would fight for it, no matter what. Even if my family never came around. Even if they never understood. We would build our future together, one step at a time. And that was enough. The days following the wedding were a blur. Ethan and I had returned to our small apartment, just outside Norfolk. The one that had quickly become our home. It wasn't glamorous, with mismatched furniture and thin walls, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living my life for myself. We spent our days in the ordinary rhythm of married life, Ethan in the engine room, me at my desk handling logistics. Both of us coming home to share dinners that were simple but filled with a quiet sense of contentment. But as much as I tried to move forward, my family's rejection lingered in the back of my mind. A constant ache that never fully went away. It wasn't just their absence at my wedding. It was the years of feeling like I had to prove myself to them, to meet their expectations, only to find out that none of it mattered. Ethan's unwavering support helped, but the truth was, I hadn't completely come to terms with how far apart we were. Then, the call came. The one I had never expected, the one that felt like it was from another world. I was sitting at my desk, scrolling through emails, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, recognizing the number from the television network. My stomach tightened as I picked it up, uncertain of what to expect. "Hello, Lieutenant Commander Turner." The voice on the other end was bright and professional. "This is Jessica from NBC News. We're doing a feature on military innovation. And we'd love to include your husband in the segment. We heard about his work with ship safety, and the improvements he's made with the pressure sensors on the USS Harrington. It's exactly the kind of story we want to highlight." I was stunned. "You want to feature us? For real?" "Yes," she replied enthusiastically. "Your husband's work is remarkable. We'd love to get an interview with both of you. We're also interested in your wedding, actually. A small, intimate Navy wedding. That's the kind of human interest story we think people will really connect with." My head was spinning. Of all the things I expected after my wedding, this wasn't one of them. It was a chance to show the world who Ethan really was, who we were, not just the way my family had reduced him. I don't know what to say. I stammered, glancing over at Ethan, who was sitting on the couch, reading something on his phone. I felt the tension in my chest ease a little, as I thought of the story we could tell. "It's a simple story, really," Jessica continued. "Just you, your husband, and the impact his innovation has had. We want to show the world the power of the unsung heroes, the sailors who do incredible work behind the scenes." I looked at Ethan, his face full of curiosity, waiting for me to respond. My heart was pounding. "Yes," I said, the word coming out more confidently than I felt. "Yes, we'd love to be a part of it." The segment was scheduled for the following week. They would come to the base, interview Ethan about his work, and film a few shots of us together. The producers were even interested in some of our wedding photos, asking if we could provide candid shots from the ceremony. The irony of it hit me hard. My family had abandoned me, refusing to support the most important day of my life. But here we were, about to tell our story on national television. The day of the interview arrived, and Ethan and I stood in front of the camera, our hands intertwined, the weight of what we were about to do sinking in. The producer, a woman with bright eyes and a smile that seemed almost too perfect, asked Ethan to explain his contribution to the ship's safety improvements. Ethan spoke with ease, his calm demeanor always in place, as he described how his prototype for real-time pressure data had saved the ship during a critical emergency. His hands moved as he spoke, showing the intricacies of the work he had done. It was clear that this wasn't just a job for him. It was a passion, something that mattered deeply. As I watched him, I felt a swell of pride. This was the man I had chosen to marry. The man who had been dismissed as just a seaman by my family, but whose work had made a tangible difference. My heart swelled as I listened to him speak, his words measured, humble, yet filled with the quiet confidence that came from doing something well. After the interview, the producer asked if we would share some thoughts on our wedding. The conversation quickly turned to the people who had been missing from the day. I knew this would be a delicate subject, but when she asked me about my family's absence, I didn't hesitate. "We didn't marry for rank or prestige," I said, my voice steady. "We married for love. And for me, that's what really matters. Ethan is a man of character. That's why I married him." The producer looked at me, her eyes bright with emotion. "That's the kind of love people need to see," she said softly. "It's real. It's powerful." The interview ended, and the crew packed up their equipment. As the final shots were being taken, I glanced at Ethan, the man who had stood by me, who had never once wavered in his commitment to me. In that moment, the world felt small. The cameras, the crew, the interview, it was all secondary. All that mattered was the quiet life we had built together, in spite of everything. As we left the set, I felt a shift inside me. For so long, I had been haunted by my family's rejection. But now, with the world about to see our love, I felt a quiet peace. My family may have turned their backs, but I had Ethan, and that, for the first time, felt like enough. What I didn't know was that when the segment aired, it would change everything. Not just for us, but for the family that had cast me aside. And it would force them to confront the truth about who I had become and who they had failed to see. The phone buzzed again, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had been avoiding the calls all morning, but I knew what it meant. My family. My mother's name flashed on the screen, the number I had ignored so many times before. The weight of it all settled in my chest, and for a moment, I just stared at the screen, unsure of what to do. Ethan was sitting next to me on the couch, his arm casually resting on the back, his eyes glued to the TV. He glanced over when he saw the expression on my face. "You don't have to pick up," he said softly. But I could tell he knew I was already considering it. I shook my head. I should. I don't know why I keep avoiding them. You're not avoiding them, Kaitlyn. You're protecting yourself, he said, his voice steady. You've been dealing with them for your whole life. Don't let them back in just because they regret it now. I sighed, the weight of his words settling deeper in my mind. Ethan had been the one constant in my life. The one person who always had my back, no matter what. But my family. They had been the ones I longed for approval from. The ones I had tried so hard to please. I thought they'd come around, but they hadn't. And now, they were calling. Not because they cared, but because they saw what was on TV. I pressed the green button, my finger trembling. The phone clicked as I brought it to my ear. Hello. Kaitlyn, sweetheart, We just saw you on television. My mother's voice was high, breathless, as if she had run to pick up the phone. We didn't know it was going to air like that. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the disappointment, for the words I knew were coming. I'm sure you didn't, I replied, my voice neutral, though the sting of their absence still lingered. We were wrong, she continued quickly, her words tumbling over each other. We had no idea how important Ethan's work really was. And you, Kaitlyn, you looked wonderful. So strong, so poised. The words felt empty, like a last-ditch attempt to make up for what had already been said. I looked over at Ethan, who was quietly watching me, his expression unreadable. He could hear her too, even if she wasn't speaking directly to him. Why didn't you tell us it was airing? My mother asked. You should have called. Your father and I would have liked to have known. I could feel the walls closing in. This was it. The apology, the regret. The words that meant nothing now. I didn't think it mattered, I said, keeping my voice even, though I could feel the frustration building inside me. You made it clear how you felt about me, about my choices. And now, you're calling because you saw me on TV. Because the world saw what you refused to. I can't keep pretending it's all okay. There was silence on the other end. I almost thought she had hung up, but then I heard her take a deep breath. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. But we were trying to protect you. We just wanted what was best for you. I swallowed hard. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to protect your image, your reputation. Her silence answered that question. And your brother, she began again after a long pause. Mark, he saw the segment, and he called us. He said he might have been wrong about Ethan. Mark, my brother. I could picture him now, sitting in his high-rise office, surrounded by people who would never understand the kind of life I had chosen. He's just like you, I said quietly, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. He'll only come around if it benefits him, if Ethan's name is suddenly valuable enough to him. I'm sorry, she whispered. We were wrong. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. All the years of trying to please them, of meeting their expectations, felt like they had just been erased in one breath. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt hollow. I wanted the apology, but not at the expense of everything I had sacrificed. You don't get to decide when you're sorry, Mom, I said, my voice cracking slightly. You don't get to turn it on when it's convenient. I know, Kaitlyn, she said softly. I know. But we want to make it right. We want to meet Ethan, to show him we were wrong. The words seemed rehearsed now, empty. I'll let you know when we're ready, I said, surprising myself with how firm I sounded. I understand, she replied, her voice quiet, almost defeated. We love you. Please know that. I didn't say anything at first. I wanted to say something. Something that would make this feel real. But nothing came out. Finally, I just said, goodbye, Mom, and hung up. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand. Ethan said nothing at first. But after a few moments, he reached for my hand, his fingers warm against my skin. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded, though my throat was tight. I don't know. I whispered. I don't know what to do with any of this. You don't have to do anything, he said, his voice steady and sure. It's their mess, not yours. I don't know if I can keep pretending it doesn't matter, I said, my voice faltering. I've spent so long trying to make them proud, Ethan, and now they just want to come back, just like that. You're not pretending, Kaitlyn. You're living, and you have me. That's what matters. I leaned against him, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. I wish it were that easy. I wish I could just forget it all. But they're my family, Ethan. And no matter what they've done, they still matter. They matter because you let them matter, he said quietly. But that doesn't mean you have to let them break you. I closed my eyes, the silence between us stretching out, as I let his words sink in. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't have to keep living in their shadow. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally standing in the light, on my own terms. It had been a few weeks since the interview aired, but the phone calls didn't stop. Every time, I thought they had finally understood. Another message would appear on my phone. Another attempt to enter my life on their terms. My mother's voice had softened, and my father's coldness had begun to crack. But I still wasn't sure how to feel about their change. Were they truly sorry? Or were they just afraid of being left out of my life completely? Ethan and I had spent the last few days just being together. Quiet, peaceful, and surrounded by the life we had chosen. His presence was a balm to my bruised heart. But despite the warmth of our apartment, the weight of what I had yet to face hung over me. The phone buzzed again. Another missed call from my mother. Ethan was sitting on the couch, flipping through a book on ship maintenance. His brow furrowed in concentration. He had a way of getting lost in things, diving deep into whatever project or problem he was tackling. And it always brought him comfort. I, on the other hand, had been buried in a constant cycle of messages and calls that didn't seem to stop, no matter how many times I pressed ignore. You should call them back, Ethan said without looking up. I frowned, the tension in my shoulders tight as I stared at the phone in my hand. Why? So they can tell me they saw me on TV, and now they're proud. Or so they can offer me some last-minute apology. He looked up then, his eyes soft but firm. No. So you can make a choice. Are you going to hold on to the past and let them dictate how you feel? Or are you going to let go of the hurt and decide for yourself what you need? I exhaled, leaning back against the chair. It's not that simple, Ethan. They're my family. I've spent my whole life trying to meet their expectations. And now, they want to pretend like none of it matters. I know, he said, his voice low. But sometimes, Kaitlyn, people don't come around on their own. Sometimes, you have to be the one to make the decision to move on. You're not their project anymore. I nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking deep. I was tired of being the person who waited for validation from the people who had never truly seen me. I was tired of trying to prove myself to them, only to be met with rejection time and time again. I'll call them, I said finally, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. But this time, it's going to be on my terms. Ethan gave me a small smile. You don't need to prove anything to them. You've already proven who you are. I took a deep breath and dialed the number. The phone rang once, then twice, before my mother's voice greeted me. It was the same voice from the other day, breathless, practiced, like she was trying to sound more sincere than she truly felt. Kaitlyn, darling, I'm so glad you picked up, she said, her tone almost too sweet. We've been meaning to talk to you. Your father and I were just so impressed with the segment. You looked amazing. And Ethan, what a good man he is. We should have known. I clenched my jaw, but I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to interrupt her. I needed to hear what she would say next, needed to understand if any of it was real. I know we've had our differences. And I know I haven't always been the mother you deserved, she continued. But seeing you on television, I think we've made a mistake. We've been so blinded by appearances, Kaitlyn, and we were wrong. I closed my eyes, trying to keep my emotions in check. This wasn't an apology. This was an admission of guilt. This was them trying to rewrite the story on their terms, trying to make themselves look good after everything they had said and done. I don't need an apology, Mom, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I don't need you to tell me you were wrong. What I need is for you to see me for who I am, not as some failure of your making. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I understand, she finally said, her voice quieter, almost broken. I want to see you, Kaitlyn. I do. We're just trying to figure out how to fix things, how to make it right. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. You can't fix this, Mom. What's broken can't just be patched up with a few kind words. I've been trying to live up to your standards my whole life. But not anymore. I'm done with that. I'm living my life for me now. For Ethan. And if that means you can't be part of it, then that's something I have to accept. Her silence lingered in the air between us, and I felt the weight of it settle deep inside me. This was it. This was the moment I had been avoiding for so long. The moment when I had to let go of the dream of family acceptance, the dream of everything being okay. I'm sorry, Kaitlyn, my mother whispered, her voice barely audible. I wish I had been different. But I want to try. I want to be part of your life again. I let her words hang in the air for a moment, unsure of what to say. I had spent so much time wishing for them to come around, to realize that I wasn't the person they had always wanted me to be. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'm not sure what that looks like, Mom, I said quietly. But maybe we'll figure it out. In time. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. But I was finally ready to move on. to stop waiting for them to catch up, and to start living the life I had chosen. A life with Ethan, a life built on my own terms. I turned to him, meeting his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly free. "We'll figure it out," I whispered, my voice steady. "Together." Ethan smiled, his hand finding mine once more. "Always." It had been a few days since I had spoken to my mother, and though the conversation left me feeling unsettled, there was a sense of finality to it. It was done. The walls between us, built up over years of hurt and misunderstandings, weren't just going to come down because of one phone call. But it was a start. And maybe that was all I could ask for. Ethan and I continued to settle into our new routine, and each day, I found myself feeling more at home in our small apartment. It wasn't perfect by any means. The walls were thin, the furniture mismatched, but it was ours. We built it together, and it felt like it was the only place I could truly breathe. The quiet mornings, the shared dinners, and even the late night conversations filled with dreams and frustrations, they were all a part of this new life. A life where I didn't have to pretend. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find Ethan sitting on the couch, his head bent over a ship's manual. But there was something different about the way he looked up when I walked in. He wasn't just looking at me, he was looking at me as if I were something worth seeing, something worth paying attention to. "Hey," he said, his voice warm. "How was your day?" I kicked off my shoes and sank into the chair across from him. "Long," I sighed. "But you know, the usual. Supply chains, maintenance schedules, endless paperwork." He chuckled, his gaze soft. "I bet you'd rather be back on the ship. Managing logistics for actual missions, right?" I smiled. "Maybe. But the ship's paperwork still can't compete with being with you every night." His expression softened further, his eyes never leaving mine. There was something about the way he looked at me, steady, unwavering, that felt like a quiet promise. In that moment, I realized how far we'd come. From that first day, I had met him on the USS Harrington, with his smudged uniform and easy grin, to this. A life built on mutual respect and love. "You know," I said, after a long pause, "I'm really proud of you." He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Me, what did I do?" I leaned back in my chair, taking in the warmth of the room and the comfort of his presence. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About everything. About how we're building our lives here, without worrying about anyone else's approval. And how that feels. Real. For the first time in a long time, it feels like I'm finally living on my terms. Not my parents', not anyone else's. Just ours." Ethan didn't say anything right away. He didn't need to. He just reached across the space between us, taking my hand and pulling me closer to him. He didn't say anything, but the look on his face said everything. "You deserve this, Kaitlyn," he said quietly, his voice steady. "You deserve to live for you. Not anyone else. And I'm glad I get to be a part of that." I smiled. The weight of the world suddenly feeling lighter. "Thank you," I whispered. We sat in the quiet for a while, letting the moment settle between us. But even though it was peaceful, I couldn't help but think of what was coming next. My family had started calling again, mostly my mother. Though Mark had sent a text here and there. I knew they were trying, in their own way. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could ever go back to the way things were. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It wasn't even about their rejection. It was about how I had changed, how I had become someone who no longer needed their approval to feel whole. The following weekend, my parents called again. This time, it was a scheduled visit. They wanted to see us. They wanted to make things right. I had no idea what that even meant. But part of me wanted to see what they would do, how they would show up this time. Ethan and I agreed it was time. Time to face them. Time to see if they could truly change, if they could really see me, see us, for who we were now. That Saturday morning, I found myself standing in the kitchen, making coffee, when I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat. They were here. Ethan stood beside me, his presence calming. "You ready?" he asked, his voice steady. "I guess we'll find out," I muttered, before opening the door. There they were. My mother, dressed in a perfectly pressed pearl gray blazer. My father in his usual crisp button, down, and Mark, his hair too neatly combed, his suit a little too formal for our small apartment. They stood there, uncomfortable and unsure of how to act. My mother smiled too brightly, but her eyes didn't match her expression. "Hello, Kaitlyn," she said, her voice almost too sweet. "You look radiant." I nodded, stepping aside to let them in. I couldn't hide the worriness I felt in my chest. "It's good to see you," I said, though the words felt like a formality. As they stepped inside, the tension was thick in the air. They glanced around at our mismatched furniture. The humble apartment that had become my sanctuary. My mother immediately straightened her back, clearly uncomfortable in the space. My father's eyes flicked over the simple decor, his gaze calculating, but he said nothing. "We've been thinking." My mother started again, her voice softer now. "About everything. About how we've handled things, and how we haven't been there for you. For both of you." She paused, looking at Ethan for the first time, as if he were a stranger she needed to assess. "We were wrong." I looked at her, my heart heavy with disbelief. "You were wrong." "About what?" She fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable, but I could see the struggle in her eyes. "About him," she said, nodding toward Ethan. "About your choices. We never saw it, Kaitlyn. We didn't see him. But we do now." I exhaled, my mind racing. "Do you?" Mark shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the floor. "Maybe we didn't handle things right," he said, his voice low. "But I think we're ready to start over. To be part of your life. To see what's really important." I didn't know how to respond. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was a step, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. "You want to be part of my life," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Then stop trying to change me. Stop trying to make me fit into a mold that doesn't fit. Stop treating me like a project. If you really want to be in my life, you'll have to respect the life I've built with Ethan. We're not going to change for anyone." There was a long silence, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was real. My parents didn't know what to say, and I could tell they were finally starting to understand. "Okay." My mother said softly, almost in disbelief. "Okay." Ethan reached over and took my hand, his grip firm, his presence steady. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. Maybe things would never be perfect with my family. But I was okay with that. I was finally learning to stand on my own, And for the first time, I wasn't looking back. The months that followed were a quiet kind of healing. I hadn't expected it to be easy, but I hadn't realized how much peace could come from simply living for myself. Each day, I woke up next to Ethan, his presence a steady anchor in a world that often felt unsteady. We didn't need grand gestures. Just the simple moments. Sharing coffee in the morning, sitting on the couch after long days, and talking about everything and nothing at all. We were building something real. Something lasting. My family had made attempts to reconnect after that first conversation. My mother called a few more times, always trying to bridge the gap. But I wasn't ready to dive back into that dynamic. The phone calls weren't just an apology, they were their way of rewriting history. But for the first time, I wasn't chasing their approval. I was letting things unfold on my terms, and that felt like enough. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the balcony of our small apartment, the breeze gentle as it swept through the trees nearby. The weight of the past few months settled over me, but instead of the usual heaviness, I felt light. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for something to change. I wasn't waiting for my parents to apologize or for my brother to finally understand. I was simply living. Ethan joined me, sitting beside me with his coffee in hand. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from my face before looking out at the sunset. "You know," he said quietly, "we've built something pretty incredible here." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "I think we have. It's not perfect, but it's ours. It's real," he added, his voice steady but filled with so much warmth. I looked at him, the man who had never once wavered, never once asked me to be anything other than myself. "It is," I said softly, "and that's all I ever wanted. To be real." Over time, my relationship with my family slowly evolved. They came around, in their own way. My mother, ever the perfectionist, still struggled to understand the life I had chosen, but she started showing up. She asked more questions about the Navy, about Ethan's work, and about the things that truly mattered. And while it wasn't an immediate shift, I began to see that she was trying. For the first time, it felt like an honest effort, not just a way to save face. Mark, too, had reached out, though in a much less apologetic way. His tone had softened, and though it took him a while, he started to respect the boundaries I'd set. He'd text every now and then, mostly about work or something trivial, but it was a start. Slowly, I realized that the past no longer had a grip on me. It didn't define me anymore. Ethan and I had our life. And I had finally stopped waiting for anyone else to give me permission to live it. A few months later, Ethan received recognition for his work on the ship's safety systems. It wasn't the kind of recognition that would make headlines, but it meant something to both of us. He was awarded a Navy Achievement Medal during a small ceremony, and as always, his humility shone through. He wasn't the type to seek attention, but his pride in his work was evident in the way he spoke about it. My parents, for the first time, were there. My father, his hands stiff with the unfamiliar gesture, shook Ethan's hand after the ceremony. "You make our daughter better." "Thank you," he said quietly, and for once, the words didn't feel hollow. Ethan, ever humble, replied simply, "She makes me better, too, sir." I watched it all unfold, the quiet reconciliation, the slow but steady rebuilding of a bond that had been strained for years. There was no dramatic moment, no sweeping gesture that changed everything. It was just time. And the realization that things didn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. Later that evening, Ethan and I sat on our balcony once again, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. "You know," he said, his voice soft but thoughtful, "I think they finally get it. They see you now. Not just the daughter they wanted you to be, but the woman you've become." I looked at him, my heart full. "It's been a long road, hasn't it?" He nodded. "It's been worth it, though. Because now, you're free. We're free." The weight of that freedom settled in, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel everything I had been holding back. I didn't need my family's approval. I didn't need anyone's validation. I had built a life with Ethan, a life I was proud of. And that, more than anything, was worth everything. I took his hand in mine, squeezing it gently as we sat in silence, the night unfolding around us. There was no grand moment of triumph, no victory lap. Just a quiet understanding that this was enough. This was the life we had chosen, and it was beautiful. And I knew, deep in my soul, that no matter what came next, I was ready to face it. Because I had finally learned the truth. My worth wasn't determined by who showed up for me. It was defined by how I showed up for myself. And that was more than enough.